If you could create a law that everyone had to follow, what would it be and why? The rules we never questioned. There's a strange power in rules, not because they're always right, but because we rarely stop to ask where they came from, or who benefits from them, or what they cost us. You grew up learning them before you had the language to disagree. Rules spoken, rules unspoken. Rules carved into culture, family, religion, tradition. Rules whispered with smiles, enforced with silence. Be polite. Don't talk too much. Don't cry in public. Don't want too loudly. Don't be too different. Don't be too you. And so you followed them. You obeyed. You adapted. You shrank your joy to avoid disturbing anyone. You folded your questions into your pillow at night, waiting for permission that never came. But what if you could write your own law, not just for you, but one that everyone would have to follow? No exceptions, no excuses, no more inherited silence. What kind of world would you build? Would it be a law that protects softness? A law that honors boundaries? A law that punishes manipulation, no matter how subtle, no matter how polite? A law that forces every person to sit in someone else's story before judging their choices? Or maybe a law that makes healing mandatory, not hidden, not private, not something you're left to figure out alone while the world expects you to function. Because here's the truth most people ignore. The rules we live by weren't written by people who healed. They were written by people who controlled. People who feared discomfort, who feared difference, who feared what would happen if others stopped playing small. So they made rules that looked like respect, but smelled like obedience. They called it normal. It was just consensus, built on shame. They said, don't make a scene. But they meant, don't make us look at what we'd rather ignore. And now those rules live inside you. Every time you apologize for something that didn't need an apology. Every time you say yes, just to be liked. Every time you downplay your success so no one feels threatened. Every time you hide your pain because you don't want to be too much. So, what would happen if we rewrote the rules? If we stopped pretending the system is neutral and admitted it was designed for conformity, not compassion? If we stopped enforcing fake smiles and started teaching emotional fluency? If we stopped rewarding quiet suffering and started honoring honest mess? Let's ask a real question. If you had the power to write one law, one unbreakable, universal law, what would you make sacred? Would you outlaw cruelty? Would you require vulnerability? Would you criminalize indifference? Would you make it illegal to raise a child in an environment where love is conditional? And more importantly, why does that law matter to you? 'Cause that's where the real answer lies, not in the rule itself, but in what it reveals about the pain you've known, the hope you still carry, the world you secretly wish existed. Because maybe your law isn't about control at all. Maybe it's about freedom. Freedom to feel. Freedom to stop pretending. Freedom to live a life that doesn't require you to disconnect from yourself just to survive. And maybe, your law isn't about punishing others. It's about protecting the parts of you that were never protected. So I'll ask you this. If you could make one thing sacred in this world, something no one could break, violate, or ignore, what would it be? And what does that say about the life you were forced to survive without it? What the world forgets to protect. There's something strange about the laws we already live with. They regulate speed limits. They protect money. They define borders. They punish theft, noise, violence, property damage. But they don't protect silence, the kind that breaks you from the inside. They don't punish emotional abuse, not the kind that leaves invisible bruises. They don't stop someone from stealing your self-worth over years of subtle manipulation. They don't outlaw absence, the kind that happens even when someone is physically present, but emotionally gone. And what's worse, These things that aren't illegal, they are normal. It's normal to stay in relationships that drain you, normal to work in jobs that erase you, normal to hide your truth because it's inconvenient for others, normal to wear a mask that matches the room, even if it kills your light. But what if your law, your one sacred law, could undo some of that? What if it forced people to see each other, to actually stop, to actually listen, to care in a way that wasn't performative, transactional, or conditional? Would your law require people to pause before speaking, to ask, is this kind? Is this true? Is this necessary? Would your law demand that parents learn emotional intelligence before raising children, that employers understand trauma before managing others, that schools teach boundaries before equations? Or maybe your law would simply say, no one is allowed to become someone else's wound. Imagine what would change. Imagine a world where manipulation is as unacceptable as theft, where ghosting someone is treated with the same weight as physical abandonment, where silence is not a passive act, but something held accountable, where kindness is not just a virtue, but a responsibility. Let's get honest. You've been hurt by things that aren't technically crimes, haven't you? You've been left behind, ignored, belittled, gaslit, but there was no courtroom for that. No one came to help. No judge declared it unjust. You were told to get over it, to move on, okay? To be the bigger person, eh? And now you live with the residue of all that unpunished pain. So, what if your law made healing non-negotiable? What if your law said you are not allowed to harm others in the name of your own unhealed wounds? What if your law didn't just forbid cruelty, but required awareness? You see, the world is full of laws that protect structures, but almost none that protect souls. So maybe your law wouldn't be written in ink or stone, but in the way people treat each other when no one is watching. Maybe your law would sound more like, you must be honest, especially with yourself. You must rest, not as a reward, but as a right. You must not weaponize your pain. You must ask before assuming. You must never use someone's love as a lever. You must listen when someone says, this hurts me, even if you didn't mean to cause it. Because real justice doesn't always happen in courts. It happens in conversations, in kitchens, in bedrooms, in the quiet moments where someone chooses not to repeat the harm they grew up inside of. So I'll ask you again, if you could create a law that the whole world had to follow, what pain from your own story would it finally prevent? What part of your life would have been different if that law had always existed? And what would it feel like to finally live in a world that honors what you were once forced to endure in silence? The law you were always waiting for. What if the world had always followed your law? Really? Stop for a moment. Imagine it. The version of you that was ignored would have been seen. The version of you that was punished for being sensitive would have been honored for their depth. The version of you that had to shrink, adapt, please, apologize, perform, would have simply been allowed to be. What would that kind of world have done to you? Or rather, what kind of you would it have allowed to emerge? That's the real power of a law. Not just what it punishes, but what it protects, what it nurtures, what it makes possible. So when you think about the law you'd create for the world, you're also revealing the law you wish had existed for you. And maybe that's the beginning of healing. Not demanding justice retroactively, but creating it forward, okay? So no one else has to survive what you barely did. Maybe your law isn't about control at all. Maybe it's about rewriting permission. Permission to feel without being labeled. Permission to speak without being silenced. Permission to say no without guilt. Permission to say yes to your dreams without ridicule. But let's be honest, if it were that easy, we'd all be living differently by now, wouldn't we? So why don't we, right? Why do we still live by rules we didn't choose? Why do we follow systems that hurt us? Why do we hand our power to beliefs that don't love us back. Because change is terrifying. Because rewriting the rules means confronting everything we've built on top of them. Because if you pull one thread, you risk unraveling your whole identity. But what's the alternative? To live a whole life according to someone else's definition of good enough. To keep going through the motions just because they're familiar. To survive on autopilot and call it responsibility. You've already tried that path. You know where it leads. You know the flavor of quiet resentment. You know the emptiness of being successful but unfulfilled. You know what it's like to be applauded for things that make you feel nothing inside. So maybe it's time. It's time to make the law real. Not just in theory, not just as an emotional exercise, but in the way you live, the way you treat others, the way you treat yourself. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. You've probably violated your own law more than anyone else. You've silenced yourself. You've broken promises to yourself. You've ignored your own needs to make others comfortable. You've tolerated what you swore you never would. You've told yourself it's not that bad when it absolutely was. So maybe, before demanding the world follow your law, you need to ask, do I? Do I live by the values I wish others did? Do I offer myself the grace I so desperately want from others? Do I protect my softness? Oh, do I weaponize my strength? Do I truly believe I deserve the world I'm dreaming of? Or am I still trying to earn it by proving my pain? That's the thing no one tells you about power. It's not granted. It's claimed, quietly, deliberately, daily. It's not in the shouting. It's in the choosing. Choosing to build a new way, even if you have to walk it alone for a while. So, what does that look like? Maybe it means speaking even when your voice shakes. Maybe it means saying no, even when it disappoints someone. Maybe it means quitting what looks successful but feels like self-betrayal. Maybe it means being okay with being misunderstood because you finally understand yourself. Maybe it means returning to the little version of you, the one who cried too much, felt too deeply, asked too many questions, and saying, you were never the problem. The world just didn't have the law to hold someone like you, till now, because now you're the one who gets to write it. So write it clearly. Write it with the ink of your own story. Write it with the compassion you never received. Write it with the rage of every moment you stayed silent. Write it with the tenderness that says, no one should have to earn the right to be whole. Then go live by it every day. Even when it's hard. Even when it costs you approval, comfort, certainty. Even when it breaks your old self wide open. Because the world needs more people willing to walk in integrity, not perfection. To say, this is the line. This is what matters. This is what I will no longer allow in myself or anyone else. And the beauty is this. You don't need to be in politics to write laws. You don't need to hold office. You don't need a title. Your life is your legislation. Every boundary you hold, every truth you speak, every time you refuse to repeat harm, even when it's all you were taught. So I'll ask you one last time. If you could create a law that everyone had to follow, what would it be and how would you start living it today? Because maybe that law already exists right there in your body. In the ache you feel when something isn't right. In the fire that rises when something needs to change. In the quiet, sacred truth you've always known, but were too afraid to say out loud. Say it now. Say it in your choices. Say it in your relationships. Say it in the way you show up, raw, imperfect, honest. Say it so clearly that those around you either rise with you or fall away. This is how the world changes, not with permission, but with courage. And the law, it begins with you. Your turn now. If you could create a single law that every human being had to follow, what would it be, and what part of your story would it heal? Drop your law in the comments. This space become the world. We're brave enough to imagine together.